In today's video, I'm discussing sports drinks. I'm going to talk about what they are, who needs them, and what is the difference between Gatorade and Powerade, two of the most common sports drinks available. Hi, my name is Erica Stevens. I'm an accredited sports dietitian based in Canberra in Australia. This channel is all about nutrition and sports nutrition, so if you love those topics, please give this video a like, share it, and subscribe to the Sportrition channel. So let's get into it. Number one, what is sports drink? Sports drink is basically water, carbohydrate, and electrolytes. And electrolytes are things like sodium and potassium. The first sports drink was Gatorade, and this was actually created about 54 years ago in the United States of America. And there was an American football team called the Gators, or they still exist actually, in Florida, and that's where Gatorade gets its name from. So they were looking at the players and seeing that they were being quite affected by heat, so Florida being a very warm place. And in American football they wear a lot of gear, and so they sweat quite a lot of gear in the heat, hard exercise, so they're sweating a lot, and so they looked into how they could actually help these athletes, and that's how Gatorade basically came about. So the purpose of a sports drink is to provide not only hydration, but also carbohydrate to the muscle and some electrolytes to replace what's being lost in sweat. So essentially it is a rehydration drink, but it also provides some carbohydrates. So it replaces, in some instances, the need to eat food to get carbohydrate. So number two, who actually needs sports drinks? These drinks are widely available in Coles and Woolworths. Those are supermarkets in Australia. You can walk down to any store and basically they will be an option in the drinks fridge. But who actually needs them? They certainly are not for inactive people. We can just drink water and stay hydrated. However, sports drinks really are for athletes. They are a practical way to deliver fluid, carbohydrate, and electrolytes in a sports setting. Generally speaking, sports drinks are most useful for those that are exercising at moderate to high intensities, for moderate to long durations, and in hot weather. Some examples of when sports drinks are useful would be for sports like American football, also things like soccer, rugby, AFL, any point where there is half time, where there's an opportunity to consume fluids, and also where there are water runners and athletes are able to drink during the game. What these games have in common is that they are relatively moderate to long in duration, usually 90 minutes or more. They are high intensity, so in a game situation or a competitive situation, athletes are usually exercising at the most extreme levels for decent portions of the game. And some of these sports are also over summer or in warm climates. So that adds to the need or to it being reasonable to utilise a sports drink for those occasions. A couple of other notable examples of when sports drinks would really be warranted are long duration events such as marathons or long course triathlons, and also Ironman events, which are incredibly long duration. So the reason why they're really great for these events is that generally speaking people can tolerate them quite well. They're going to drink water or some sort of fluid anyway, so rather than drinking all water, having some sports drink allows to replace some of the carbohydrate that's being burned off in the muscle, and also provides some electrolytes which are being lost in sweat. So why is it important to hydrate during exercise? Basically, as soon as we start exercising, our core temperature rises, and in order to protect ourselves from our core temperature going too high, our body will start to sweat, and that is our cooling mechanism. However, if we sweat more than we actually rehydrate, so if we're sweating more than we're actually putting back in with fluids in the form of drinking, then we can become dehydrated. And what is not good about dehydration is that it can affect performance in a negative way. And probably the biggest thing that stands out with an effect of dehydration is that everything feels harder than it should when you are dehydrated compared to when you are hydrated. So everything feeling harder than it should is not good for sports performance. A couple of other things that are notable with dehydration is that our ability to concentrate goes down. So in sports where decision making is really important, which is most sports, then that's obviously not going to be ideal for performance either. And our skills start to erode with dehydration. So things that we practice over and over to get better and better at, in a dehydrated state, some of these skills are at a much lower level than if we're in a hydrated state. And again, obviously that's not going to be great for sports performance. Okay, so now we know what's in a sports drink, we know who might actually benefit from a sports drink. Now the last question, and this is probably one of the most common questions that I get speaking with clients one-on-one, but then also in presentations to large groups of people, is what is the actual difference between two of the most common sports drinks on the market, which is Gatorade and Powerade. So let's get into that question. Okay, so if we look at the Gatorade nutrition label, we can see that per 100 mils, it has 6 grams of carbohydrate. So it's 6% carbohydrate. And most sports drinks will be in the vicinity of 6 to 8% carbohydrate, because that is the percentage that is most easily absorbed by the gut. The higher the percentage, the less easy it is to digest, and we actually can create issues. So 6 to 8%, so it's a very normal amount of carbohydrate. We also have 51 milligrams of sodium per 100 mils, and when I read the ingredient list, the sodium is in the form of sodium chloride. And when we think about sweat and the composition of sweat, the two main electrolytes that are lost in sweat are sodium and chloride. So we do want the sodium chloride form of sodium in our sports drink. So Gatorade ticks that box. Then we also have 22.5 milligrams of potassium per 100 mils. So the only two electrolytes here are three electrolytes, sodium chloride and potassium. So that's Gatorade. So now let's have a look at Powerade. So here we have Powerade. We'll have a look at the nutrition panel. Per 100 mils, we have 5.8 grams of carbohydrate. So that's 5.8% carbohydrate. So it's really not that different to Gatorade. It's tiny bit less, but not too different. Sodium, we have 28 milligrams of sodium per 100 mils. And when I read the ingredient list, I'm looking into the light, we have both sodium citrate and sodium chloride. So we have a mixture of different types in this drink. Potassium, we have 33 milligrams per 100. What's interesting about Powerade is they also add a couple of other electrolytes. Calcium, 14.7 milligrams per 100 mils, and magnesium, 5.9 milligrams per 100 mils. So probably the largest difference that occurs between the drinks, Gatorade and Powerade, is that Gatorade has a tiny bit more carbohydrate per 100 mils, but not a big difference. And Powerade contains 2 extra electrolytes that Gatorade does not contain, which is the calcium and the magnesium. So before we think that Powerade is going to be a superior product because of the extra electrolytes of the calcium and magnesium, we have to recognize that the amounts of those things in this drink are really small, and we get calcium and magnesium from all sorts of foods. So it's unlikely that the amount of calcium and magnesium in this drink is going to make a substantial difference to an athlete during I guess a shorter term exercise bout like a game. In a Ironman event where potentially someone's not eating for an extended amount of time or eating very few nutritious foods, maybe that might be an advantage to have some magnesium and calcium coming in. However, I would say again, average Joe playing sport on the weekend, really don't need to be concerned about getting calcium and magnesium from a sports drink, because if they're eating well, they're going to be getting plenty of that and getting adequate amounts of that from their foods during the day. So I don't see that necessarily as a great advantage to be using Powerade over Gatorade. So in the end, to be honest, if we're speaking really broadly and about, you know, the average Joe that's potentially playing soccer on the weekends and needing some carbohydrate and some fluid at half time, I probably wouldn't say that they need to worry about which brand that they get in these sports drinks, because they're just so similar. I would say though that if we had someone at the very elite level that was potentially in a very long duration event like Ironman, we're probably wanting to maximize absolutely every single thing that we can. I guess what I haven't mentioned is that these are not the only two sports drinks on the market, and there are actually heaps and heaps and heaps more. And so I guess what I would say is, if you want to know about even more sports drinks and even more brands and types of sports drinks, then leave a comment below, because it might be interesting to do a video on other sports drinks in the future. In terms of age, I probably wouldn't see a need for sports drinks for really young children playing sport. The only time I would potentially say it might be useful for a young person, so someone under the age of say 15 for example, might be if they are playing at a very high level in their sport and they can't tolerate food at halftime in their game, so they just cannot go near oranges or bananas, or they just can't eat something real at halftime. Then I would say that a little bit of sports drink at that time is probably going to benefit their outcomes in the second half. And maybe that's a warranted time to use it in someone young. However, for the most part, I would just encourage young people are using food, mostly at halftime. So fruit obviously is a really common one. And then that goes for adults too. So sports drink doesn't necessarily have to be used. And again, it's really hard to speak generally about this, but because this is a general video, I am speaking generally about it. I would say that more so at the elite level of competition and the elite level of athletes, that a sports drink is one of the most effective and most practical ways to get a combination of both fluid, carbohydrate and electrolytes into someone's body when they most need it and when they probably most likely don't feel like eating solid food. So there is a time, there is a place, there is a person that these are useful for, and that certainly is not everyone, and it's very contextual to the situation and to the individual. But like I said, this is a general video, and hopefully I've given some indication of who these drinks are really primarily for and who they're not for. So that's pretty much it for today. We've talked about what a sports drink is, who might benefit from a sports drink, and what is the difference between Gatorade and Powerade. So hopefully I have answered all those questions at least briefly for you, so that you have a better understanding of sports drink and what it's for. And I hope maybe potentially in the future to do another video on some of the other sports drinks that are now available in the market, which is just an enormous amount. But if you enjoyed this video, please like it, and if you want to see more from me, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.